I was kneeling on stained motel carpet with bloody knuckles when I finally pried open my dead grandfather's safe. My ex-husband had taken everything, the mansion, the cars, even my self-respect. All I had left was this rusted metal box that weighed more than my future. Inside wasn't gold. It was a blood-red jade seal and a stack of crumbling ledgers written in Korean. I touched the seal. Just once, somewhere across the Pacific, an alarm must have screamed. 12 minutes later, my motel door exploded inward. Black suits, gun holsters, and him. A man whose tailored elegance made the violence in his eyes even more terrifying. He moved like a predator, talked like royalty. "Miss Snyder," he said, his accent turning my name into a weapon. "Do you understand what you're holding?" I didn't, but I was about to. The man was Yu Chao, head of the Korean Mafia. The seal? The only key to billions in hidden syndicate money. My grandfather? Not a harmless traveler, but the silent partner who built their empire. I thought I'd lost everything. Turns out, I'd just inherited a kingdom, and every monster in the underworld wanted me dead for it. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm responding to everyone. Click subscribe. Like this video. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and trust me, you won't want me to miss them. Let's begin. The Hermes luggage hit the pavement first, bursting open like a piñata of my former life. Silk blouses tumbled into the gutter. A Valentino heel skittered under a parked Mercedes. Then came the jewelry boxes, emptied of anything valuable. My ex-husband had been thorough. I stood on the marble steps of what used to be my home, watching Marcus direct the staff like he was choreographing a ballet of humiliation. He didn't even look at me. Just stood there in his Tom Ford suit, checking his Patek Philippe as if my erasure from his life was just another appointment to squeeze between lunch and his tea time. "The safe too," he called out, waving dismissively toward the foyer. Two men in moving company uniforms struggled with the massive iron box, their faces red with exertion. It crashed onto the sidewalk with a sound like thunder, cracking the concrete. My grandfather's safe. The one thing Marcus couldn't open, couldn't sell, couldn't turn into liquid assets to fund whatever new life he was building without me. "That's everything," Marcus said, finally meeting my eyes. His gaze was ice. 3 years of marriage, and this was how it ended. Not with apologies or explanations, but with him looking at me like I was a stain he'd finally removed from expensive fabric. "The locks will be changed within the hour. Don't come back. Marcus, please." The words tasted like poison, but desperation has no dignity. "Sign the papers, Julia. Take your inheritance." He said it like the word disgusted him. "And disappear." The door closed. The lock clicked. Simple as that. I stood there as neighbors pretended not to watch from behind curtains. Mrs. Chen from 3 doors down, who'd smiled at me at every charity luncheon. The Caldwells, who'd toasted our anniversary just 2 months ago. Now they watched me like I was street theater, entertainment, for their morning coffee. My phone was dead. My credit cards, canceled. I had $43 in my purse, and a safe I couldn't open sitting on a sidewalk in Brentwood, like a monument to failure. A taxi slowed, and I waved frantically. The driver took one look at the safe and shook his head, accelerating away. The second taxi did the same. The third didn't even slow down. I tried to drag it myself. The metal was rough under my palms, rust flaking off like dried blood. It didn't budge, not an inch. I pulled until my shoulders screamed, until my manicured nails broke against the iron, until sweat soaked through my Chanel blouse. "Need help, sweetheart?" A construction worker called from across the street, his tone making it clear what kind of payment he'd expect. I ignored him and called the only person I had left. My cousin Deshawn answered on the 5th ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Julia, it's 6 in the morning. I need your truck." My voice cracked. "Please." The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. "Where are you?" An hour later, Deshawn pulled up in his battered pickup, took one look at me surrounded by designer wreckage, and didn't ask questions. He just helped me load garbage bags of clothes into the truck bed. The safe took both of us and a furniture dolly he kept in the truck. Even then, we nearly dropped it twice. "What's in this thing, a body?" he grunted, as we finally rolled it up onto the tailgate. "I don't know." The truth felt heavy as the safe itself. Grandpa never told anyone the combination. "Your grandpa was crazy, Julia. You know that, right? All those years in Asia, coming back with weird stories about jade dealers and—" "I know." I climbed into the passenger seat, my whole body aching. Through the side mirror, I watched my former home recede. The perfect lawn. The fountain Marcus had insisted on. The life I'd performed for like it was a stage play, and I was the star nobody wanted. Deshawn drove in silence for 3 blocks before asking the question I'd been dreading. "Where are we going?" I pulled out the crumpled receipt from my purse. The Starlight Motel on Figueroa. $42 a night. Weekly rates available. Downtown, I said quietly. He didn't comment on the fall from Brentwood to Skid Row adjacent. Didn't offer his couch or ask what happened to the Julia who used to summer in the Hamptons. He just drove, and I was grateful for the mercy of his silence as we hauled my grandfather's rusted secret toward whatever came next. The motel room smelled like cigarettes and broken dreams. I'd been working on the safe for 6 hours, my hands raw and bleeding. A screwdriver bent beyond recognition on the floor beside me. The combination lock had rusted shut decades ago. My only option was brute force, and the kind of determination that comes from having absolutely nothing left to lose. The crowbar I'd bought from the hardware store down the street finally found purchase. Metal screamed against metal. I threw my entire body weight against it, and something inside the mechanism gave way with a sound like breaking bones. The door swung open. I'd expected gold bars. Stacks of cash. Something that would explain why my grandfather had guarded this thing like it contained the secrets of the universe. Instead, I found paper. Leather-bound ledgers, their pages yellowed and brittle, covered in cramped handwriting that alternated between English and what looked like Korean characters. Columns of numbers, names I didn't recognize. Dates going back to 1987. And beneath the ledgers, nestled in a bed of black velvet like a sleeping serpent, was the seal. It was the size of my palm, carved from jade so deeply red it looked like solidified blood. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. A dragon coiled around itself, so detailed I could see individual scales. Chinese characters I couldn't read were carved into the base. The stone was cold when I picked it up, cold in a way that seemed to seep into my bones. Beautiful. Terrifying. Worth something, certainly, but hardly the fortune I'd hoped would save me. I was examining it in the weak light from the bedside lamp when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Silence on the other end. Just breathing. Then the line went dead. My hands started shaking. I set the seal down carefully, suddenly feeling watched. The motel room's thin curtains seemed inadequate, the locked door flimsy. I was being paranoid, I told myself. Exhausted and paranoid, and the rumble of engines cut through my thoughts. I moved to the window and pulled the curtain back an inch. My blood turned to ice. The parking lot was filling with black sedans, expensive ones, the kind with tinted windows that reflected the streetlights like mirrors. 4 cars, no 5. They glided in silently, parking in formation like soldiers taking position. Doors opened in unison. Men emerged in dark suits, their movements coordinated and purposeful. They weren't police. Police announced themselves, made noise, established authority through volume. These men moved like shadows, like violence wrapped in expensive fabric. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. The fire escape. I could grab the seal, leave everything else. The door to my room exploded inward, the lock shattering like it was made of paper. I screamed, stumbling backward over the open safe. 2 men entered first, their eyes sweeping the room with professional efficiency. They didn't touch me, didn't speak, just flanked the doorway like sentries. Then he walked in. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers except for the eyes. His eyes were wrong, too cold, too calculating, holding the kind of darkness that came from seeing terrible things and doing worse. His suit probably cost more than my first car, charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe, perfectly tailored to shoulders that suggested he didn't need the men with him to be dangerous. He stopped 3 feet from me, his gaze moving from my face to the safe to the seal lying on the stained carpet where I'd dropped it. For a long moment he just stared at the red jade. Then, impossibly, he bowed. Not to me, to the seal. A precise, formal gesture that seemed utterly incongruous with the violence of his entrance. When he straightened, his expression had shifted into something I couldn't read. Miss Snyder. His voice was accented, smooth as silk and sharp as a blade. My name is Yu Chao. I believe you have something that belongs to my family. I don't know what you're talking about. My voice came out strangled. This was my grandfather's. Your grandfather? He stepped closer, and I pressed back against the wall. Robert Snyder. The silent partner. The ghost of soul. His smile was terrible. Did he tell you what he really did in Asia? Did he explain what you just inherited? I shook my head, mute with terror. He crouched down, picked up the seal with a reverence that bordered on religious, and held it up to the light. The red jade seemed to glow. This, he said softly, is the key to $73 billion. And you, Miss Snyder, are now the most valuable woman in the world. His eyes met mine, and I saw my death in them. Or something worse than death. You're coming with me. They didn't handcuff me. Didn't need to. I was surrounded by men who moved like trained killers, riding in a car that probably cost more than my entire ruined marriage, with nowhere to run even if I'd had the courage to try. Yu Chao sat across from me in the back of the sedan, the red seal resting on his knee like a pet, his attention on his phone as if kidnapping women from motels was just another Tuesday. We drove through downtown, then into the financial district, where buildings scraped the sky and money whispered in every corner. The car descended into an underground garage, past 3 security checkpoints that opened without question at the sight of Chao's face. We parked in a private bay next to cars I'd only seen in magazines. The elevator rode so smoothly I barely felt the motion. 43 floors without stopping. No buttons to press, no options to choose. It opened directly into a penthouse that redefined every concept of wealth I thought I understood. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city like we were gods surveying an empire. The furniture was minimal but perfect. Every piece deliberate, expensive, chosen by someone who understood that true luxury whispered instead of shouted. Artwork I was certain belonged in museums hung on walls. The air itself smelled expensive, like leather and sandalwood and power. Sit. Chao gestured to a chair facing a massive desk of dark wood. I sat because my legs were shaking too badly to stand. He moved to a wall panel, pressed something, and a screen descended from the ceiling. With a few swipes on a tablet, images appeared. Black and white photographs, grainy with age. My grandfather, young, maybe 30, standing next to Asian men in suits. My grandfather shaking hands with someone whose face had been deliberately blurred. My grandfather signing documents, always in the background, always slightly out of focus. Your grandfather came to Seoul in 1986, Chao began, his voice taking on the cadence of a professor delivering a lecture. He was a junior accountant for an export company. Legitimate, boring, American. No one paid attention to him. He advanced to the next slide. No one except my grandfather, Park Yu-jin, who was building something revolutionary. A crime syndicate that operated like a corporation. Clean money, offshore accounts, legitimate investments hiding rivers of cash from weapons, gambling, human trafficking. I felt sick, but I couldn't look away. They needed someone the Korean government wouldn't watch. Someone foreign, forgettable, with access to American banking systems. He looked at me. They needed your grandfather. And Robert Snyder was brilliant. He created a web of shell companies, trusts, and foundations, so complex that even we can't fully trace it without the original documents. The ledgers, I whispered. The ledgers. Chao nodded. For 40 years, your grandfather moved money. Cleaned it. Invested it. Turned blood money into real estate empires, tech startups, pharmaceutical companies. He took his percentage, lived modestly, and never spoke a word to anyone about his real work. The screen changed to show a photograph of the seal. This was his signature. His authorization. Without it, the money stays frozen. So take it. My voice was stronger than I felt. You have the seal. You have the ledgers. You don't need me. His laugh was cold. The seal is worthless without the bloodline. Your grandfather built in a failsafe, biometric locks, DNA verification, legal documents that require the living heir to authorize any transaction over $10 million. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine. When he died, the entire fund froze. $73 billion. Locked behind protocols that require your signature, your DNA, your authorization. The number was incomprehensible. I couldn't even picture what $73 billion looked like. There are 12 families in my organization, Chao continued. All of them want access to the grandfather fund. Some of them want to kill you and forge the documents. Others want to marry you to gain legal control. A few are pragmatic enough to suggest we simply extract what we need, and then... He made a gesture that needed no translation. And you? My throat was dry. What do you want? I want what my grandfather wanted. A partner, not a prisoner. Someone who can navigate both worlds, legitimate and shadow, without flinching. He stood, moved to the window, his silhouette dark against the glowing city. But first, I need to know if you're capable of surviving what comes next. Because every criminal organization in Asia now knows you exist. Your ex-husband's people are already searching. And if they find you before I can secure your position, he turned back to me. You'll wish I'd killed you in that motel room. The seal sat on the desk between us, glowing red in the low light. What position? I asked, though I already knew the answer would change everything. The silent partner. The role your grandfather held for 4 decades. His smile was dangerous. Welcome to the family business, Miss Snyder. The woman who entered my room the next morning looked like she'd stepped out of a Milan runway. Severe black suit, hair pulled back so tightly it could have been a weapon. Eyes that assessed me the way a jeweler examines a flawed diamond. I am Yoon Min-ji, she announced in crisp, British-accented English. I will be handling your transformation. We have 72 hours before the board meeting, where you will be presented as the new silent partner. Currently, you look like a woman who was thrown out of her house. This is unacceptable. I was still in the clothes I'd worn to the motel. rumpled and stained with rust from the safe. I'd slept maybe 3 hours on a bed more comfortable than anything I'd owned during my marriage, and woken to find guards posted outside my door, not protecting me, containing me. What if I refuse? I asked, though we both knew it was an empty question. Minji's smile was sharp. Then you will die looking like a victim. I assumed you'd prefer to die looking like a queen, should it come to that. She wasn't wrong. The next 3 days were a baptism by fire. Minji attacked every aspect of my existence with surgical precision. My clothes were burned, literally burned in an incinerator, and replaced with a wardrobe that cost more than most people's mortgages. But these weren't the soft, feminine pieces Marcus had preferred. These were armor, sharp-shouldered blazers in black and charcoal, silk blouses the color of blood, heels designed to add inches and intimidation in equal measure. You are not here to be pretty, Minji said, circling me as I stood in front of floor-length mirrors. You are here to be formidable. Remember that. A hairstylist cut 8 inches off my hair, reshaping it into something sleek and severe. The makeup artist taught me a face that looked nothing like the soft, smiling mask I'd worn for Marcus. This was sharper, older, dangerous. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Better, Minji declared. Now we work on how you move. She taught me to walk like I owned every room I entered, to sit with my spine straight and my hands still, to make eye contact until other people looked away first. Small adjustments that shifted me from prey to predator. But the real education came from the documents. Minji brought me folders thick with information. Shell companies, offshore accounts, investment portfolios. I had a bachelor's degree in art history, and now I was expected to understand financial instruments that even legitimate banks found morally questionable. The grandfather fund flows through 17 countries, she explained, spreading papers across the dining table in my gilded cage. Your grandfather created redundancies, fail-safes, dead ends that lead nowhere. You need to understand the system well enough to authorize transactions without destroying the architecture. I studied until my eyes burned, memorized account numbers, company names, the intricate web of money laundering that had funded my grandfather's comfortable retirement and built an empire for the Yu family. On the 3rd night, I overheard them. I'd gone to the kitchen for water. The penthouse was large enough that I could move through it without seeing my guards when voices drifted from Chow's office. The door was cracked open, and I recognized his voice immediately, low and controlled. She's a liability. A different voice, older, speaking Korean. Minji had been teaching me basic phrases, enough that I caught fragments. Once the transfer is complete, dispose. The board wants her eliminated. Chow's response was in English. Whether for my benefit or simply out of habit, I couldn't tell. They don't trust an outsider. And you? The older voice was skeptical. You trust her? Silence stretched. I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing. I trust that she's more useful alive than dead. For now. Chow's words were measured. But I can only protect her if she proves indispensable. If she's just a signature on documents. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I retreated to my room, my heart pounding. 72 hours, Minji had said. 72 hours to transform from victim to partner, to prove I was worth keeping alive. The next morning, when Minji arrived for another day of preparation, I met her at the door already dressed, my face perfect, my spine steel. Teach me everything, I said. Not just how to look the part. I want to know how the money moves. I want to understand the business, all of it. She studied me for a long moment, then smiled, a real smile this time, sharp and approving. Now, she said, you're beginning to understand. You're not here to play the silent partner, Miss Snyder. You're here to become her. I had 72 hours to make myself irreplaceable. Or 72 hours to live. I wasn't supposed to be in Chow's office. But Minji had taught me something valuable over the past 3 days. Powerful people assumed obedience, and in that assumption lay opportunity. The office was empty, Chow away at some meeting that involved men with harder eyes than his. I'd watched them arrive, expensive suits hiding expensive violence, and decided this was my chance. If I was going to survive, I needed information. Real information, not the curated lessons Minji fed me. His laptop sat on the desk, closed but not locked away. Arrogant. I opened it, expecting password protection, but the screen illuminated immediately, still logged in. More arrogance. Or maybe a test. I didn't have time to care which. The email client was open. Messages in Korean and English, some flagged, others archived with the efficiency of a man who controlled empires. I scrolled through quickly, looking for anything that mentioned my name, my grandfather, the fund. Then I found it. A message from someone identified only as Serpent. The preview text made my blood freeze. Marcus Caldwell desperate. Offered collateral for debt extension. I clicked it open. The message was in English, probably because Marcus didn't speak Korean. It was a forwarded email chain, And as I read, my entire understanding of the last week shifted, like tectonic plates grinding into new configurations. From Marcus Caldwell to redacted subject RE, final extension request. I can get it. The safe, I know my ex-wife took it. It contains documentation from her grandfather's operations in Asia, mid-80s to recent. Original ledgers, authentication seals, everything your organization needs to access frozen accounts. Worth billions. I just need 2 more weeks. She's in LA somewhere. I have people looking. The reply was brutal in its brevity. You have 1 week. No safe. No more extensions. We'll collect our debt another way. Starting with your mother's estate in Palm Springs, then working through your assets until we reach body parts. The date stamp was 3 days ago. I scrolled further, found more messages. Marcus hadn't just been looking for me. He'd been frantic. Private investigators, police contacts, even social media monitoring. He'd tracked down Deshaun, questioned him. My cousin had apparently told him nothing, but Marcus had figured out I'd gone downtown, started checking motels systematically. Another message, this one from yesterday. Starlight Motel on Figueroa came up empty. Room was paid for but abandoned. Black sedans reported in parking lot by motel owner, described as Asian gang activity. Advised next steps? I sat back, my mind racing. Marcus didn't want me back out of love or regret. He'd promised my grandfather's legacy to some criminal organization to cover gambling debts I'd never known he had. The perfect husband, the successful attorney, had been hemorrhaging money in underground poker games and high-stakes sports betting. And now he owed someone who made threats about body parts. I kept reading, piecing together the full picture. The organization Marcus owed money to wasn't Korean. They were Yakuza, Japanese. A rival syndicate to Chow's operation. The same people who'd been trying to access the grandfather fund for decades, blocked by my grandfather's biometric protocols. If Marcus delivered me to them, they'd have leverage over Chow's entire operation. They could force me to authorize transfers, drain the fund, destroy the Yu family's financial foundation. Find something interesting. I spun around, nearly knocking the laptop off the desk. Chow stood in the doorway, still in his suit, his expression unreadable. How long had he been watching? My ex-husband, I said, deciding honesty was my only play. He's looking for me. He owes money to the Yakuza, millions apparently. He promised them the safe's contents to clear his debt. Chow moved into the room with that predatory grace he wore like cologne. He glanced at the screen, then at me. You weren't supposed to see that. I needed to know what I was really dealing with. I stood, refusing to cower. You've been telling me I'm valuable, that I'm the new silent partner. But you've been treating me like a prisoner while my ex-husband is out there working with your enemies. And what would you have me do? His voice was soft, dangerous. Tell you that your husband of 3 years was a degenerate gambler? That he married you specifically because your grandfather's reputation in certain circles made you valuable? The words hit like a physical blow. What? Marcus Caldwell was introduced to you at that charity gala by a Yakuza intermediary. They'd been tracking Robert Snyder's movements for years, knew he was old, knew he'd die soon. They needed someone close to his only heir. Chow's smile was cruel with truth. Your entire marriage was a setup, Julia. They just didn't count on your grandfather's paranoia, or the fact that he'd lock everything behind biometrics they couldn't fake. I couldn't breathe. 3 years. The courtship, the wedding, the life I'd built, all of it theater, all of it lies. How long have you known? My voice was barely a whisper. Since before I came to that motel. He pulled out his phone, showed me a dossier with my picture, Marcus's picture, our wedding photo with red lines connecting us to various criminal enterprises. Why do you think I came personally? You weren't just valuable, you were already compromised. The room tilted, everything I thought I knew dissolved. He's coming for me, I said finally. And when he finds me, when he finds you, Chow interrupted, he'll discover that the woman he threw away is no longer his victim. His eyes glittered. Tell me, Julia, do you want to hide from your ex-husband, or do you want to destroy him? I found Chow in the gym at 5 in the morning, shirtless and destroying a heavy bag with precision that spoke of years of training. Each strike was controlled violence, economy of motion married to devastating power. Sweat gleamed on his skin, highlighting muscles that had nothing to do with vanity and everything to do with survival. He saw me in the mirror but didn't stop. Didn't acknowledge my presence until he'd completed whatever internal count he was maintaining. Then he caught the bag, steadied it, and turned to face me. You don't sleep, I observed. Neither do you, apparently. He grabbed a towel, wiping his face. It's 4 hours before Minji arrives. I don't want Minji. I stepped further into the room, my bare feet silent on the mats. I want you to train me. His eyebrow rose. Minji is perfectly capable. Minji is teaching me to look dangerous. I need to actually be dangerous. I moved closer. close enough to smell the clean sweat, and something underneath, sandalwood and steel. You said I need to be indispensable. That means understanding everything, not just the parts you think I can handle. And what makes you think you can handle what I do? Because I'm still alive. I met his eyes, refused to look away, even when the intensity of his gaze made my pulse quicken. Because my grandfather survived 40 years in your world. Because Marcus used me for 3 years, and I never suspected. I'm done being underestimated. Something shifted in his expression, a calculation being recalculated. The board meeting is in 3 days. They're expecting a figurehead, someone I can control. If you walk in as anything else, then they'll know I'm a threat instead of a tool. I crossed my arms. Isn't that better? A partner you chose rather than a liability you inherited? He studied me for a long moment, then smiled. A real smile this time, sharp and approving, and something else I didn't want to name. You're learning, faster than I expected. He tossed me the towel. Get changed. We start now. The next 3 days rewrote everything I thought I knew about power. Chow didn't just teach me the business. He showed me the anatomy of an empire. We spent hours in his office, him explaining the intricate web of legitimate and shadow operations. Hotels in Singapore that laundered money through inflated room service charges. Tech companies in Seoul that funneled cash through fake consulting contracts. Real estate holdings in Los Angeles that existed only on paper but generated millions in phantom rental income. The key, he said, pointing to a complex flowchart on his screen, is that every dollar can be traced to something legitimate. The art isn't hiding the money. It's making the hiding look boring enough that no one wants to look closer. But the real education happened after midnight, when the legitimate world slept and the shadow world woke up. He took me to meetings in the back rooms of restaurants, where men bowed to him and sized me up with eyes that calculated my worth in blood. He taught me to read body language, to hear the threat beneath polite words, to know when someone was lying by the way they held their chopsticks. Power, he told me one night as we stood on his balcony overlooking the city, is mostly perception. If they believe you're dangerous, you become dangerous. If they believe you're weak, you're already dead. And what do you believe about me? I asked. He turned to look at me, and in the dim light from the city below, his face was all sharp angles and shadow. I believe you're the most fascinating problem I've encountered in years. Problem? I kept my voice light, but something electric had entered the space between us. You're supposed to be a means to an end, a signature on documents, a bloodline to unlock accounts. He moved closer, and I could feel the heat radiating from him despite the cool night air. But you're becoming something else entirely. And that bothers you. It wasn't a question. It complicates things. His hand came up, almost touching my face, then dropped. Professional distance, maintained by sheer will. The board expects me to control you. My rivals expect me to use you. What they don't expect is for you to be. What? I challenged, stepping closer, drawn by something I knew was dangerous, knew was stupid, but couldn't resist. Equal. The word hung between us like a confession. We stood there, inches apart, the city breathing below us. I could see his pulse in his throat, could feel my own heartbeat thundering. This was a line we shouldn't cross, a complication neither of us needed. His phone shattered the moment, buzzing with an urgency that made him step back, the professional mask slamming back into place. He looked at the screen, and his expression went cold. Marcus just put a bounty on your head. $2 million to whoever delivers you alive to a Yakuza safe house in Koreatown. He met my eyes. He's not just looking anymore. He's hunting. The electricity between us transmuted into something sharper, more dangerous. Partnership forged not in attraction, but in mutual survival. Then let's make sure, I said, my voice steady despite everything, that I'm the last thing he ever hunts. Chow's smile was terrible and beautiful. Now you're thinking like a queen. The Brentwood Country Club glittered like a jewelry box, all crystal chandeliers and people who measured their worth in zeros. I'd been to 100 events like this as Marcus's wife. Always smiling, always gracious, always disappearing into the background of his success. Tonight I arrived like a knife. The dress Minji had chosen was red, the exact shade of the jade seal, the color of blood and power and things that couldn't be ignored. It clung to every curve, transformed my body into a weapon. My hair was swept back severely, diamonds at my throat that cost more than the country club's annual operating budget. Chow had insisted on the jewelry. Let them know exactly what you're worth, he'd said, fastening the necklace himself, his fingers brushing my skin in a way that felt deliberate. Now those same fingers rested lightly on the small of my back as we walked through the entrance. He wore a tuxedo that made him look like elegant death, and together we radiated the kind of danger that made people instinctively step aside. The event was Marcus's engagement party. He'd wasted no time replacing me, 6 weeks divorced, and already celebrating his future with Simone, the interior designer he'd probably been sleeping with for years. The invitation had been public, posted on social media, announced in the society pages. An act of erasure disguised as celebration. Chow had smiled when he showed me the announcement. Your ex-husband just made this remarkably easy. We entered the ballroom, and I felt the moment people noticed. Conversation didn't stop. That would be too dramatic. But it fractured, stuttered, reformed around the shock of my presence. Julia Caldwell, who'd been thrown out like garbage, walking in on the arm of a man who looked like he owned countries. I saw Mrs. Chen, who'd watched me be humiliated from behind her curtains. Saw the Caldwells, Marcus's parents, their faces hardening with disapproval. Saw Simone, blonde and brittle in white lace, her hand tightening on her champagne glass. And then I saw Marcus. He stood near the bar, mid-laugh, with a cluster of attorneys from his firm. He looked good. He always looked good. That was part of his arsenal. But when his eyes found me, the laugh died. His face went through a series of expressions too quick to catalog. Shock, confusion, fear, then rage. He started toward me, but Chow's security materialized like shadows given form. 4 men in perfect suits, positioned between us with the subtle efficiency of professionals. Marcus stopped, understanding dawning that this wasn't a chance encounter. This was a play. Julia, he tried to sound calm, authoritative. What are you doing here? Celebrating, I smiled, the expression Minji had taught me, the one that didn't reach my eyes. I heard congratulations were in order. You need to leave. His voice dropped lower, meant only for me, but Chow heard everything. You're not welcome here. That's where you're wrong. Chow spoke for the first time, his accent turning Marcus's name into something dismissive. Mr. Caldwell, I believe you and I have mutual acquaintances. The Yamaguchi Gumi, specifically. They tell me you've been looking for my associate here. The color drained from Marcus's face. Around us, the ambient noise of the party continued, but in our small circle, the temperature had dropped to Arctic. I don't know what you're talking about. Marcus tried to recover, but his hand shook as he set down his drink. No? Chow's smile was surgical. Strange, because you've been offering $2 million for information on her whereabouts. You promised certain parties that you could deliver her grandfather's legacy. A legacy that, unfortunately for you, belongs to my organization. I watched Marcus process this, saw the exact moment he understood how thoroughly he'd miscalculated. He'd thought the safe contained documents he could trade, leverage he could use. He hadn't known the safe would activate an alarm that reached across the Pacific. Hadn't known that approaching the Yakuza would mark him as an enemy to every Korean syndicate in the world. The debt you owe, I said quietly, my voice steady, is considerably larger than you realize. You didn't just borrow money, Marcus. You tried to steal from people who don't forgive theft. Julia, please. His voice cracked, and I felt something dark and satisfying bloom in my chest. I didn't know. They told me it was just business. Just business. I repeated the words he'd said to me when he threw me out. That's what you called it when you took everything from me. When you had your lawyers freeze my accounts. When you changed the locks and put my life on the curb like trash. Simone appeared at his elbow, her face pinched with confusion and dawning horror. Marcus? What's happening? What's happening, Chow said, addressing the growing circle of onlookers, is that Mr. Caldwell has been conducting business with some very dangerous people. The kind of business that tends to have consequences. Security, real security, not the country club rent-a-cops, was moving toward us now. But Chow raised a hand, a gesture of peace. We're leaving, he said. We just wanted to offer our congratulations, and to let Mr. Caldwell know that his debt has been purchased by my organization. We'll be in touch about repayment terms. He offered me his arm, and I took it, turning away from Marcus's stricken face with the grace Minji had drilled into me. As we walked toward the exit, I heard Marcus call my name one more time, desperate and broken. I didn't look back. Outside, in the cool night air, Chow opened the car door for me. Before I slid in, I allowed myself one small smile. That, I said, felt good. It was meant to. He closed the door, walked around to his side. But you understand what we just did. We declared open war. The Yakuza will retaliate. Marcus will panic and do something stupid. And your name is now permanently attached to mine in every database and surveillance system in the city. I looked at him across the leather interior, this man who'd stormed into my motel room and changed everything. Good, I said. I'm done hiding. His smile was proud and dangerous, and something that made heat pool in my stomach. Then let's give them a war they'll never forget. They came for us 3 days after the gala, and they came hard. I was in Chow's office reviewing transfer documents when the first explosion rocked the building. The windows rattled but held. Bulletproof glass, Chow had told me once, rated for small arms fire and most explosives. The lights flickered, then emergency systems kicked in, bathing everything in red. Chow was on his feet instantly, gun appearing in his hand from somewhere I hadn't seen. "Stay behind the desk," he ordered, his voice deadly calm. "There's a panic room." "No." I stood, my heart hammering, but my voice steady. "I'm not hiding anymore." He looked at me like he wanted to argue, but gunfire erupted in the hallway outside, close enough that I could hear men shouting in Japanese. The Yakuza had found us. "The vault," I said suddenly. "The safe. We brought it here. There's something else inside. A hidden compartment my grandfather mentioned in the ledgers. Now is not the time. It's evidence." I grabbed his arm. "Marcus's crimes. My grandfather documented everything. Insurance, he called it. If Marcus is working with them, if he told them about the safe's contents, they'll want that evidence destroyed." Another explosion, closer this time. The door to the office shuddered but held. Reinforced steel, like everything else in Chow's world. He made a decision, in the space of a heartbeat. "The vault is 2 floors down. We'll never make it. Then we bring them to us." I moved to his desk, pulled up the building security system that Minji had shown me during one of our sessions. "The vault is accessible through the service elevator. We can reroute them, make them think we're trying to escape to it." Chow's expression shifted from protective to calculating, seeing not a liability but a strategist. "You'll start a firefight in a confined space. Better than waiting for them to breach this office." I met his eyes. Trust me, he did. Or maybe he just recognized the same reckless determination that had probably kept my grandfather alive for 40 years in this world. We moved fast. Chow's men were already engaged in the hallways, buying us time with their lives. I tried not to think about that as we took the private stairwell down, Chow leading with his gun raised, me following with the red seal clutched in one hand and a weapon I barely knew how to use in the other. The vault level was chaos. Bodies on the ground. Some in suits I recognized from Chow's security detail, others in tactical gear marked with Yakuza tattoos visible even through their sleeves. Smoke hung thick in the air, making my eyes water. The vault itself stood open, breached by shaped charges that had turned the reinforced door into twisted metal. My grandfather's safe sat inside, looking small and pathetic amid the destruction. "There." I pointed to the safe as gunfire erupted behind us. Chow's remaining men had caught up, were engaging the Yakuza forces, trying to push through from the elevator bank. I dropped to my knees beside the safe, fingers searching the interior I'd thought was empty. My grandfather's ledger had been cryptic. The truth lies beneath the lie. I'd assumed it was philosophical rambling. Now I understood. There, a seam in the metal, barely visible. I pressed the seal against it. The jade fit perfectly into an indentation I'd never noticed. Something clicked, and the bottom of the safe lifted, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside were USB drives, dozens of them, each labeled with dates and names. And photographs. Marcus with Yakuza bosses, Marcus signing documents, Marcus at illegal gambling dens. Bank statements showing money he'd laundered, contracts he'd negotiated for human trafficking operations. Everything you'd need to send him to prison for the rest of his life. My grandfather hadn't just been the silent partner. He'd been collecting insurance against everyone he'd ever worked with. "Julia!" Chow's shout made me look up. A Yakuza soldier had broken through, was raising his weapon toward me. I grabbed one of the USB drives, held it up like a talisman. "Marcus Caldwell." I shouted in English, hoping someone understood. "This drive contains everything he's done for you. Kill me and it goes to the FBI." The soldier hesitated. That hesitation cost him. Chow put 2 bullets in his chest before he could recover. But others had heard. The gunfire slowed, stopped. An eerie silence fell over the vault level, broken only by groaning metal and someone's labored breathing. A voice called out in accented English. "The woman. We want the woman and the evidence. Then we leave." "Counterproposal," I called back, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "You leave now, and I don't send copies of these drives to every law enforcement agency in 3 countries. Marcus Caldwell has been working with you for 5 years. I have documentation of every crime, every transaction, everybody. You want that going public?" Silence. Then, "You're bluffing." I pulled out a drive labeled Caldwell Yamaguchi Operations 2021 to 2024 and held it up. My grandfather didn't bluff. Neither do I. This drive alone contains enough evidence to dismantle your West Coast operations. There are 47 more where this came from. More silence. I could feel Chow beside me, tense and ready, but he let me play it out. "What do you want?" The voice again, more cautious now. "Marcus Caldwell. You bring him to me, alive and unmarked, and I'll destroy every piece of evidence that mentions your organization specifically. You walk away clean. He pays for everything. And if we refuse?" I smiled, though they couldn't see it. "Then I flood the market with information. Your enemies will know everything. Law enforcement will know everything. And the man you've been protecting will be useless to you anyway, because he'll be in federal custody. The silence stretched so long I thought they'd choose violence. Then, 24 hours. We'll bring Caldwell to the location of your choice. You bring the evidence. Agreed. Footsteps retreated. The Yakuza were pulling back, taking their wounded, leaving their dead. In minutes, the building was silent, except for the sound of Chow's men securing the perimeter. Chow looked at me, something like awe in his expression. You just negotiated a truce with the Yakuza, while kneeling in a shot-up vault. I learned from the best. I gathered the drives carefully, 47 pieces of leverage my grandfather had spent decades collecting. Now let's go get my ex-husband. He pulled me to my feet, his hand lingering on mine for just a moment. You know they might not honor the agreement. I know. I met his eyes, saw my own determination reflected back. But Marcus will come. He's desperate enough. And when he does, I smiled, sharp and cold. He'll wish they'd just killed him. The exchange happened at dawn in a warehouse district, where nobody asked questions, and cameras mysteriously malfunctioned. Marcus arrived in the back of a black van, flanked by Yakuza soldiers who looked like they hadn't slept. He looked worse. His expensive suit rumpled, a bruise blooming on his cheekbone, his hands zip-tied in front of him. When they dragged him out and he saw me standing there in the pale morning light, dressed in armor-sharp Armani, with Chow's men arranged behind me like chess pieces, something broke in his eyes. Julia. My name came out as a plea, a question, an accusation all at once. I didn't respond, just nodded to Minji, who stepped forward with a tablet and began displaying images on the large screen we'd set up. Marcus's face in the photographs, over and over. Marcus signing contracts. Marcus accepting cash. Marcus at the gambling tables where he'd destroyed his life and tried to destroy mine. These are copies, I said, my voice echoing in the empty warehouse. The originals are in 6 different locations, set to release automatically if anything happens to me. My grandfather was thorough about his insurance policies. The Yakuza representative, an older man with eyes like winter, watched the display with an expression that might have been respect. And our agreement? I held up a briefcase. Inside were the drives that specifically mentioned their organization, their operations, their names. Everything related to you. 23 drives total. Once they're destroyed, you're clean. The other 24 drives? I looked at Marcus. Those are all about him. Julia, please. Marcus's voice cracked. They'll kill me. No. I moved closer. Let him see the woman he'd thrown away transformed into something he should have feared from the beginning. They're going to let you go. And then you're going to turn yourself in to the FBI field office downtown. You're going to confess to money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy. You're going to name every legitimate business partner who was complicit in your schemes. I'll be ruined. Yes. The word was simple, final. You'll lose everything. Your law license, your family's money, your freedom. You'll spend the next 20 years in federal prison thinking about the woman you used, the grandfather you tried to rob, and the power you never understood you were playing with. And if I don't? Defiance flickered in his eyes, the last gasp of a drowning man. Then I release everything, including evidence that you've been laundering money through your mother's charitable foundation. She'll go to prison too. Your choice. The defiance died. He looked at the Yakuza representative, searching for an ally, but found only cold dismissal. They'd gotten what they needed, distance from their crimes. Marcus was just the cost of doing business. Get him out of here, the Yakuza man said. His soldiers cut Marcus's zip ties and pushed him toward a waiting car. As they drove away, Marcus looked back one last time through the rear window. I didn't wave. The Yakuza left next, taking their briefcase of drives. True to my word, we'd destroy them later, but not before making copies of the copies. My grandfather's legacy of insurance lived on. When it was just Chow and me in the empty warehouse, the morning sun breaking through the industrial windows, he smiled. That was elegant. That was justice. I felt hollowed out and filled up at the same time, like I'd finally shed a skin that had never fit right. What happens now? Now? He offered his arm. Now we rebuild. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of the penthouse that had become as much mine as his, watching the city wake up below. The grandfather fund had been systematically cleaned, transformed from shadow money into a legitimate investment empire. Hotels, tech startups, real estate, all of it legal now, all of it profitable, all of it bearing my signature, and the red seal that had become my emblem. Marcus had turned himself in, as promised. The trial had been spectacular. A fallen attorney from a prominent family, exposed as a money launderer for criminal organizations. He'd gotten 25 years. His mother had been spared, but her foundation had been dissolved, her reputation destroyed. The Caldwell name, once synonymous with Los Angeles society, was now synonymous with corruption. I felt nothing about it, not satisfaction, not regret, Just the clean emptiness of a debt, finally settled. The board meeting last month had been unanimous. Julia Snyder, the new silent partner, officially recognized and seated with full voting rights. The old men who'd wanted me dead now deferred to my financial acumen. The rivals who'd hunted me now approached through proper diplomatic channels. I'd done what my grandfather spent 40 years doing, made myself indispensable. But I'd done it better, cleaner, legitimately. Chow emerged from the penthouse, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He'd changed in 6 months too, less the lethal crime boss, more the CEO of a growing empire. We'd learned to be partners in every sense, though we still danced around the chemistry that crackled between us like live wire. "The Seoul office called," he said, handing me a cup. "The tech acquisition went through. We're officially the 3rd largest investment firm in Asia." "Third?" I raised an eyebrow. "I thought we were aiming for first." His laugh was genuine, warm. "Give it time. You've only been doing this for 6 months. My grandfather did it for 40 years and stayed in the shadows." I sipped the coffee, perfect as always. "I'm thinking bigger." "I know." He stood beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "That's what worries me. Worried I'll outgrow you. Worried you already have." But he was smiling, and there was pride in it, and something else I was finally ready to name. Below us, the city hummed with possibility. Somewhere down there, Marcus sat in a cell. Somewhere, the Yakuza counted their profits and thanked whatever gods they prayed to that they'd honored our agreement. Somewhere, people who'd dismissed me, underestimated me, thrown me away like garbage, went about their small lives never knowing how close they'd come to real power. I'd been married to Marcus for 3 years and never felt like I had a home. I'd been working with Chow for 6 months and built an empire. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I turned to face him, this man who'd kicked down my motel room door and changed everything. "I'm thinking my grandfather spent 40 years in the shadows because he was afraid of what the light would reveal. But I'm not afraid anymore." "No." His hand came up, cupped my face with a tenderness that felt more dangerous than any weapon. "You're not." We stood there as the sun rose higher. The silent partner and the crime boss turned legitimate. The discarded wife and the man who'd seen her potential when she was still on her knees in a motel room. "So what's next?" he asked. I smiled, sharp and sure, and finally, completely my own. "Everything." The city sprawled below us, full of people who didn't know my name, didn't know my power, didn't know that the woman they'd thrown away had become the queen they'd never see coming. My grandfather's legacy was secure. Marcus's ruin was complete. The Yakuza were neutered. The Korean syndicate was legitimized. And I was finally exactly where I belonged. Not behind anyone, not beneath anyone, but standing at the top of an empire I'd bled to build, with a partner who saw me as an equal and a future that stretched out like an open road. I'd opened a rusty safe and found my inheritance. Not gold, not cash, but power. And I was just getting started. Thanks for watching. Please like, comments, and subscribe.